Hello, and welcome to this very special episode of the Reset Podcast, called the PPE Right Now edition of the Reset. I am super psyched to have Joe Wilson, who's one of the founders of C19 Coalition, which I'm happy to be an advisor of over the last several months. We're going to talk about the urgent need for PPE for communities that need them the most, what we've been able to do over the last 7 to 8 months, and how you can help right now. So take a listen. Hi, Joe.
Hey Laura, how's it going? Thanks for having me
Oh,
on today.
it's 70,000 degrees and, it's raining outside, the usual foolishness, but that's okay. Um, so since it's a different episode of the podcast, we're going to go right into what is it that you do. So, Joe, who the heck are you and what do you do?
So I am the managing director of a venture fund called Undeterred Capital. Also, since March of this year, I'm one of the founders of the C19 Coalition, a group that was formed originally just as a grassroots organization to help construct a supply chain for personal protective equipment, or PPE. Eventually, the C19 Coalition morphed into a nonprofit, and to date has helped get over 1 billion units of PPE to frontline workers.
So that's incredible. So this 1 billion units of PPE was done in a matter of 7 months-ish, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, when we started, one of the first conversations I had was with, it was actually the one of the White House groups, and they were trying to estimate the total number of PPE that existed on kind of an annual basis, and the number they came back with was about 8 billion units of PPE. And so, obviously, the market has totally changed this year, but I think it speaks volumes that our partners, our C19 Coalition partners, have helped now get 1 billion units to the U.S. Over the last, I guess it's been about 8 months. It's a pretty extraordinary achievement.
Yeah, no, and obviously, full disclosure, I'm an advisor, and I've been helping to facilitate some PPEs to communities of color that need it the most. It's been really awesome to watch it happen, but I think it's really important for folks to understand how this works because, especially at this particular moment where we now will have a new administration coming in, but the number of cases are almost doubling every week now. We're at over 140,000 yesterday. That the need for PPE is extreme right at this moment. And how we got here, I think would be great for you to explain out to the audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of split those into two different questions. The first is kind of how we got here. So there's an epidemiologist friend of mine, Bill Hanong, who's at Harvard, who I first met in early March. I saw him, I think I saw him tweeting, and I cold emailed him, and we kind of struck up a friendship ever since. And Bill's line, Bill is a very humble person, but what he has repeated kind of time and time again is, I keep hoping that I'm wrong, but I haven't been yet. And I think that's a line we should all kind of keep in mind as we lurch into the winter. Because the leading epidemiologists, like, this is what they do for a living. This is what they did long before the crisis. This is what they'll do long after COVID has passed. And we should really pay attention to the way that they're thinking about these problems. In March, what Bill said is, we have an impending very large wave that's about to hit the US. In April, after it had already kind of hit the Northeast, in particularly New York City, he said, the South will likely be next. Hopefully it'll be a little less severe of a wave that'll hit over the summer. That's exactly what happened. And then he said, after the summer wave, he said, well, we really need to keep an eye on kind of late fall, early winter, because that's when cases will start to spike again if we haven't made progress. And unfortunately, he is right for a third time. And so,
has he bought lotto numbers recently? Like, Jesus.
It's a little uncanny. I mean, I think one of the things that he and a lot of people on our team have pushed back on is there are a lot of people who kind of raise false flags about the case numbers, who say, oh, the rising case numbers are due to hospitalizations. And then once those case numbers lead to more hospitalizations, a lot of people say, well, the hospitalizations are due to people kind of miscounting the people who are going into hospitals. And when those hospitalizations can lead to deaths, they say, well, okay, maybe you were right this time, but the caseload is coming down, so we're kind of over this. And then when cases start going up, it's, oh, that we're doing more testing. So we're in this kind of perpetual cycle of COVID deniers where they keep denying kind of the intensity. Unfortunately, we're now at a point heading into mid-November where the cases are closing in on double their highest ever rate. And to be fair, some of that is due to testing. In this, a lot of people think that the first surge in the spring was actually higher than the summer surge, even though the case numbers didn't line up, and that's because we just couldn't do much testing. But I think what we're seeing now is, it's hard to fake hospitalizations, and as of yesterday, those were now at record rates. I think a lot of people are now predicting that by the time we get to early December, we could be closing in on 2,000 deaths a day. And if we don't get the case numbers under control, it could be significantly higher than that.
Yeah, I think that's a scary part about this. I think, we're in this moment of kind of COVID fatigue where we've all been stuck inside. Those of us who've been good, like us, and in our protective bubbles. Like I haven't seen my mom since Christmas because I can't get on the plane to go to Florida. And now it's Thanksgiving and I'm like, well, why can't I go see my family? And I think that's kind of the big wave we're hitting up against because now folks are just like, oh, come on, is this still going on? And unfortunately, I think that's why we're also spiking. So what can we do like right now to sort of help everybody other than obviously clearly wear a mask?
Well, yeah, I think I would put it into two different buckets. So bucket one is personal responsibility, is wearing a mask, is social distancing. I know given that we're in almost month 9 of this, it can be a little tough. However, I think, if we keep it under control this winter, the next winter will be significantly better. With the great news about the vaccine, early results, which we can talk about later, with some of the seriousness of what seems to be the new administration's task force, I think we could be in a good position as we enter kind of the middle of next year. But there's not really a scenario in which this winter is not a really rough one on the COVID front. So first is personal responsibility, and really following the CDC guidelines, what elected officials are kind of uniformly saying are the best practices around controlling the spread of the virus. The second thing is we really need to prepare for a very intense 3 or 4 months. If you're looking to help, that means getting PPE to frontline workers. At this point, we have about 70 different companies, organizations, nonprofits that are helping source PPE, produce PPE, distribute PPE. We really have what we believe is the largest private sector COVID-19 group out there today. And so if you're looking to support an effort, the C19 Coalition, I really can't think of a better option there. And the other thing that I just want to highlight is, the biggest issue in the spring and in the summer was coordination, was making sure the right people were in the room, that they had access to the right resources in order to mitigate the spread of the virus. And that's why C19 Coalition came about, was to try to organize those actors, to get everyone on the same page, and then to drive to specific results. And I think by really any measure, we've really succeeded on those fronts. Our key focus over the next 4 months is both getting PPE to the people that need it the most, supporting other parallel efforts around increased testing, eventually probably assisting in some way with the distribution of the vaccine when that's available, as well as advising the new administration on the best practices here. Laura, you know better than anyone, we've been in the weeds in this for most of this year. And a lot of the lessons we've learned have been difficult ones to learn, but we've learned them and we have the expertise to be able to provide that. So I think that's going to be the role of the C19 Coalition during this winter is filling the gaps as they exist and connecting the dots for people that may have not been on the front lines of this.
Yeah, the way that I've always described folks what C19 is that you guys we're the lighthouse. And so it's like, it's not the place where you're going to stay, but it's the place that's going to guide you where you need to go. But it's never going to steer you wrong. And I think that's been the kind of awesome part of being part of the C19 family. It's one of the things where, I'm most proud of because of the fact that it's like, you guys also get it and listen to folks. So like when I said, hey, there's a huge issue around disproportionate impact around HBCUs, you're like, okay, go build something. And I think that is also the key here because there's so much noise, and folks are like, well, what do we do? And so similarly, like, someone says, hey, I've got 10,000 masks. We're like, okay, we can find you the schools or the Chicano Federation that needs it, and we will make sure that happens, and we will follow through and be that last line of defense so that that happens. And I think that's a thing when organizations are trying to figure out why we're great partners, is that, like, we're making sure this is actually done. We're getting that tracking information, but also we're also the organization is sort of understanding from an empathetic side of the universe, where not everybody is going to have the same level of information and knowledge base that we do, because obviously we can use Slack, we can everyone can do things on Twitter DMs. Some folks are still faxing, and so for organizations that might think that, like, they can't even get started, I think it's really important for them to understand that we really do have everyone's good intentions in mind when we're engaging these programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the core tenets of our organization overall is we really like to just get out of the way. We like to connect the dots for people. We like to work behind the scenes. We want to put other organizations in a position to be successful. One of the organizations that we worked with behind the scenes over the summer was Megan Smith's Shift 7 group. And they were working specifically to get PPE to Native groups, particularly in the Southwest. And so by connecting them, and keep in mind, a lot of the big problems in the spring were groups looking for millions or tens of millions of units of PPE. If we're talking about Native groups, that's a much, much smaller amount that's needed, maybe a few thousand units. And so that limits the pool of suppliers that can actually provide that product. So working behind the scenes, we were able to connect them with groups who were able to provide either free or discounted PPE to make an impact there as well. And that's, they do fantastic work, and we're happy to play a role there. But we love to take a backseat role when it comes to publicity, but we love to be in the driver's seat when it comes to driving outcomes.
Yeah, I think we don't shout the loudest, but we get the work done. And one of the reasons I was like, "Hey Joe, come on this," I was like, "Shout the smidgen," because I do think at this particular juncture, we do have to find ways for folks to understand why it's good to partner with us, but also that this situation is not solved. I think for a while we were having these conversations with folks, and they're like, "Oh, everybody's got a mask, right?" You're like, "No, like, actually, they don't." Especially in disproportionately impacted communities. And again, I think that's another thing that sets us apart, is that we realize that not everybody's going to need 1 million masks. We sent 500 masks to Isaiah House in New Jersey, and that's a homeless shelter, and we got a lovely thank you note back. Like, I think that's the thing that folks who are watching can understand, that, like, it's not a matter of everything has to be gigantic. It is the local impact that you can bring that's really important at this particular moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's two things there. One is that the local impact is what it comes down to at the end of the day, right? At this point, it's unlikely, it's possible, but unlikely that an entire state is melting down and is out of PPE. More likely, it is it's a neighborhood, it's a city, it's a hospital, it's a school that is low on critical supplies. And so as you see these needs in your own community, or as you hear about those needs, it's important to solve those problems one at a time, because that's how you can save people's lives in a very tangible way. The other thing I want to bring up is, I think the reality is a lot of the groups that were founded in March to help respond to the COVID-19 crisis, most of them don't exist anymore. And that's, the nature of it is just that people started these groups to respond to a very specific pain point. And then as COVID cases waned in the late summer, a lot of them ran out of funding. A lot of them kind of didn't see how they could fit into the puzzle. And a lot of people, had stepped away from full-time jobs that they had to get back to. So they're, very reasonable reasons that they had to kind of move on. We were able to stick through it. It wasn't always easy, but we were able to push through to the other side. And so I just want to highlight that to say there aren't a lot of us left, but the need is higher than it's ever been before. And so supporting groups like ours has never been more critical. And if we think about, blunting the spread of the virus over the winter, groups like the C19 Coalition are going to be totally critical to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a key point here that folks don't realize that everyone lost their minds in March and said, oh yeah, let's spend our profit and do this, and then one realized this is really difficult, and two, how do you sustain this, and then three, it's a summer. I think things are going down, different focus. So now that we're on the other side, we have a new incoming administration, but in between now and the 70 odd days apocalypse, we still have this COVID situation that's going down the pike. And so we very much need to work with folks who, one, are still in the game, who can still be helpful, and still want to help. And I think that's also part of this, because it's not just about getting great partners on, but like we're also a nonprofit. So I think it's important for folks to understand that, like, we love your donations. Reach out, but also let's talk about some of the partners who we've been able to work with. So our friends at like Get Us PPE and Project N95 and Stop the Spread. Like, talk about how it all kind of works with those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could spend all day talking about some of these partners. Some have been in the trenches with us since March. Some are, relatively new that have come on board. A few that are worth calling out: Get Us PPE, founded by Megan Rainey and a few other folks, have been just tremendous. When I first met Megan, our first call, she said, "Sorry, I'm running a few minutes late. I've got an ER shift that went a little bit over." So Megan was not only founding a nonprofit, she was literally
Saving
working
lives.
on the front lines to save lives. And I was like, "You can be as late as you need to be. Like, I'll work around your schedule for that." So Get Us PPE is just like a totally critical partner that has been with us since the beginning here. Stop the Spread is another fantastic one. Early on, they were actually one of our most direct connections to a lot of what was going on the federal side of things. That group has now merged with Impact Assets, and they have just been just a tremendous, tremendous partner there. We've worked with them to set up seminars and workshops over the summer to kind of plan, hey, how can we get ahead of the next wave of COVID-19, as well as look ahead to kind of second order effects of the crisis, like looming economic recession and other people who have been disproportionately impacted. So that's another group that's been tremendous. And then, it wouldn't be right to move forward without not calling out some of the corporate partners who stepped forward. Flexport, Cardinal Health, HP, IBM, Intel, tremendous, tremendous legwork that they did in the spring and over the summer. And a lot of them are doing, thankless work in the background right now. Cardinal Health, obviously one of the largest medical distributors in the United States. The amount they did behind the scenes that no one will ever know about was just tremendous. They really knew that the nation was at a critical crisis point, and they did everything they could to help course correct there. So, what's funny about the C19 Coalition is we don't say we only work with nonprofits, we only work with grassroots groups. It's really, an open tent in that way. And so a lot of the biggest leverage we've been able to achieve is through some of these corporate partners who set up manufacturing facilities, who hired a lot of people, who provided funding for nascent groups to start up. So, it's the C19 Coalition doesn't exist without the partners. And when we talk about 1 billion units of PPE delivered, that's not, you and I, Laura, who were able to, hand deliver 1 billion units. It's our partners. I mean, they're the ones who were really working on those supply chains as they collapsed. And yeah, we provided support to get them there, but it couldn't have been done without them.
Yeah, and I think that's the unique part about this. It is a really incredible public-private side of the universe, because obviously we work with lots of hospitals. We've also been able to work with lots of colleges and universities and nonprofits, but then these big corporate partners who needed a destination they could trust and know would be a great guiding force, came on board as well. And I think that's, again, the uniqueness of it all is so key right now, because again, we don't want people to have hair on fire at this particular juncture, even though it's the cases are spiking. What we do actually want to focus in on is like very strategic, very smart work, so that we can get through this period, and hopefully see the other side of it come spring 2021.
Exactly. We want to be really strategic right now, and we want to be really thoughtful with where we put resources. And at this point, 9 months in, working on this every day, we think we know what the highest leverage activities are. And we also think we know where people can go wrong at this stage and where different groups can go wrong. So at this point, for better or for worse, we're at the center of this thing. and we plan to continue driving results in the coming months.
Awesome. And okay, so how can people help? So like this is the thing. Like what is it that what is it we need going forward, especially in the next several months to really make sure that we continue to do the incredible work that we do.
So three different things. First, financial support. C19 Coalition, as I mentioned, is one of the last remaining COVID response groups that was really kind of pushing the ball forward in March. We're in a critical role now, and a lot of the people. I mean, at this point, everyone associated with the C19 Coalition is a volunteer, and a lot of those other people have full-time jobs. And so, if we want to keep the talent we have, including present company, we do need additional funding to do that. So that's number one. That's first and foremost. We want to keep the wheels on the bus as we accelerate. The second thing is, if you are interested in volunteering, if you are interested in stepping in and assisting in some way, reach out to us. Reach out to info@c19coalition.org, or you can just personally email me at joe@c19coalition.org. We are constantly taking in new volunteers and putting them to work. I mean, the only thing we ask is be realistic about the amount of hours you can put in a week, and we can help put you in the right spot. And then the third thing is, as we get into the winter and as you identify areas that are low on PPE, please let us know. Please reach out to us, again, at info@c19coalition.org. We'd love to connect you to one of our nonprofit partners in order to fulfill any sort of PPE gaps that you see. If there are other COVID problems that you're seeing, if you see a lack of testing, if you see that, this will more so be a problem as we get into March and April. But if there are areas that are just getting decimated that need early access to the vaccine, I hope we'll be able to provide a channel for that as well. So the last ask is really around just kind of keeping your eyes open and letting us know where we can fit in and support there. So to recap, 1, donations, financial support; 2, volunteering; 3, keeping your eyes and ears open and letting us know where the gaps are.
Awesome. I think that's so key. And as I say, like I said, I say this over and over again that I'm honored to be part of the C19 family because it's the work that needs to get done. And one of the reason I got involved was because I saw that too many people who looked like me didn't get what they needed. And the reason I was so proud to join C19 because that was like the first thing you're like, hey, how do we help? And we've been able to deliver hundreds of thousands of PPE to communities of color, which makes me super duper happy. And to see where we've gotten, where we're over 1 billion pieces across the country to communities and hospitals who need it, only tells us that we're doing the exact right thing at the exact right moment. And so, as Joe says, if you want to donate, if you want to volunteer, if you want to be sort of our eyes and ears locally, like very much so, the eyes and ears locally is so key for us because part of the reason we found out the issues around HBCUs was because I talked to someone over Instagram DM and they told me. We would have never had any idea. So that local information is so, so key for us. And just and keep your eyes and ears open. We're on all the social channels, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Reach out to us, let us know if we can be helpful, and hopefully we'll be able to be on the other side and actually get together and have a drink someday. But Joe, thanks so much for coming on this very special episode of The Reset. And I'll put all the information in the show notes so folks can find out how they can help.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me, Laura.
Awesome. And that is our show.